Well, there's save number 2 for Miko. Only one more remaining. At least that's what we're kind of believing. It seems like Miko this time around with this save is starting to kind of put 2 and 2 together. But again, I was kind of curious if she was going to start bringing up the concept of what happens when I reach 3. As I mentioned before, they technically not established if there's a contract, a give and take kind of aspect, or if it's just she's, up the creek without a paddle. That's my thoughts on episode 10 of Mieruko-chan, so let's jump into it. See, a lot of this episode really kind of bringing up the mystique around Zen Tono, the substitute teacher, as we get this beginning segment with this neighbor bringing some stew to him and talking about this increased amount of crows in the area, them digging through the trash, and yes, him having some blood on his hand. And it's interesting because at this point, I'm starting to... Obviously, Mieruko-chan, this series so far, has had a habit of creating a perspective of thinking one thing, but then flipping it over and showing something else. And with the fact that we're getting so much insight into Zen right now, I'm starting to wonder if things aren't going to be what they seem. As always, it will end up being something completely different that we think it's this one thing, but it ends up being this other thing. Obviously, we get a perspective of inside of his apartment, and he's washing blood off his hands, but is it really blood? Whose blood is it? Jumping forward to the later segment of the episode, at the very end, we see this person that we think is Zen coming after a cat with these really evil-looking scissors. Is it really Zen? We're supposed to assume that it's Zen. The entire episode having this glooming aura about him and this other ghost that's telling these girls not to look at him. Why is that? And I think I said, technically, Miko herself is terrified of him, but it's because of this dark aura around him. But what's creating that aura is going to be the question. Is it something that's not necessarily his fault? Like I said before, technically, we've always had this show one thing, give us the assumption, and then give us something different. And I'm really curious if Zen is going to be yet another example of this, where we make our assumptions, and then something else will come of it. It was curious that we had during this classroom segment, and Miko's obviously upset about this big monster in the room, as everybody is talking about the teacher and it's telling them not to look. At some point, she gets distracted and ends up looking up at her teacher and then having the ghost look at her. Saved, thankfully, by the stomach of Hana, because that happens. But she did bring up the idea, this thing does go inside of Zen, and she brings up the idea of, well, I could go ask the axe thing to come in and use the axe on him. Wait, what the heck am I thinking? It's like, yeah, let's go to the subway, ask the ghost of this axe guy to come over here and act. That's going to work out great. But we kind of, after this, thanks to Yulia, get the idea that possibly Hana could be facing some sort of difficulty because of Zen's presence. As Yulia kind of puts it, even you being around this guy, your life aura is going to be sucked away. As if there's some sort of negative aura around him that is draining the life force of people around him. For her, having to sustain it so much with food, I like that we're changing this goofy joke about this girl eating so much into an actual story subject here. But yeah, she's having to consume more food because this aura is being drained by the presence of Zen and all these nasty auras around him. And even though Miko wants to kind of, I guess, work out a plan with Yulia, of course Yulia thinks that Miko's angry at her for bringing up the whole subject in front of Hana. Yulia is in kind of this little middle zone where she thinks that she's their friends, but at the same time she constantly thinks that Miko is just out to get her. But this whole conversation, this whole, I guess, subject matter around Zen and Hana is really bringing a question to Miko if just kind of ignoring the things is the best option. Obviously, she acknowledges the fact that Hana has been dealing with this whole aura thing long before Miko was able to see the ghost. Because she's always had this appetite, she assumes that. But now it's technically her ignoring things is causing problems. Hana's having issues, even though it's just her eating more. It's more of an issue for her family to have to pay for her to eat so much food. But she's always dealt with this, and now she's dealing with it more because Miko technically is ignoring the problem, which is Zen and what this aura is doing. So again, funny they're taking a joke aspect of Hana and turning it into some sort of story beat. But yes, during this whole scene where she's contemplating actually doing something about this and ignoring the process, she's acknowledging that there's all these ghosts around her that she always typically ignores, and then waves at some cute kid, and then it ends up being a ghost that comes after her, and we get our second save. Like I said before, this is the second of, we assume, 3 saves that these spirits will come in and save her from a ghost. And yeah, I'm kind of at this point wondering when that third point is going to come, and if it's going to come before we deal with the situation with Zen, because whatever is right, The sad thing is that she's got one more save, and we're obviously building up this one really bad subject matter right here with Zen and whatever's following him. It is making me wonder if there's going to be a problem going forward with dealing with that. And again, like I mentioned very at the beginning, I'm curious if there is a contract here, is if there's something that she's got to pay out for those 3 saves. And, well, at the same time, what can she do in order to... Does she have to go to the place and pray again for 3 more saves is the question mark. But again, going back to the very beginning, what I was talking about following Zen and the misconceptions that we might end up having about him, I'm starting to wonder if possibly this thing that went inside of Zen, this big, huge monster that's telling everybody not to look, I'm wondering if that's the problem, if that's the thing that's causing all these issues. Like, this thing is using him in order to harm these cats, and that's why it's telling them, people not to look at him, is because it wants people to leave him alone because it's doing this thing. We had a brief moment where he was kind of acknowledging Miko being terrified by something, so it seems like there's something in there of him, but at the same time, again, we haven't necessarily seen him do any horrible acts. It's always just things around. Now, granted, I don't know necessarily if a show is going to want to show that stuff. It's not like they want to show Zen in the show massacring cats just so that we can confirm it, but we haven't really seen anything that's 100% close to showing that he's doing something. Not even just showing, something terrible in the scene with him. It's just, again, the blood and the assumption that he's doing something bad. I guess the only other thing that I forgot to mention is they did at some point have it kind of go out of its way to acknowledge that Zen has a problem with names. Now, granted, he is a substitute teacher, and him memorizing a bunch of names that quickly is going to be a problem, but he was kind of going out of its way to kind of point out several names he was getting wrong, or people that don't even go there. Like, he said a name, and I think they said that person doesn't, or that there's nobody by that name in here. One, he was saying a name wrong. So it could just be that it's trying to acknowledge that he's scatterbrained, or there's just a problem with him having memories in general. He looks like he's very zoned out. And again, I'm really getting a hint that there's probably going to be something else going on here, that he himself as Zen Tono isn't really doing this stuff, or that he's being pushed to do stuff, or that he's being manipulated. Maybe possession or something like that. But yeah, that's my thoughts on episode 10 of Mieruko-chan. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like down below, comment, let me know about the episode. What do you think of my crazy theories that Zen's actually a good guy? Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video if you can. Support us on Patreon if you can, or in the tips link in the description below. We definitely appreciate everybody that does. And y'all take care.